The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a cramped space where tension hung like a storm cloud. Harrison Ford, his face etched with lines of defiance, sat at the defendant's table. His gray suit was sharp, but his scowl was sharper, aimed at the judge perched high on the bench. Judge Margaret Hensley, her silver hair pulled tight, glared back through wire-rimmed glasses. Her gavel rested like a loaded weapon, and the room buzzed with whispers from the packed gallery. This wasn't just any case. It was personal, ugly, and about to explode. Ford was in court over a land dispute gone vicious. He'd bought a sprawling Montana ranch 10 years ago, a retreat from Hollywood's glare. But his neighbor, a wealthy cattle baron named Victor Grayson, claimed Ford's fence cut into his grazing land. Surveys disagreed, tempers flared, and Grayson's lawsuit accused Ford of trespassing and sabotage, alleging he'd poisoned a stream to ruin Grayson's herd. Ford called it nonsense, but the evidence was murky, and Grayson's lawyer, a slick man named Cutler, had a knack for twisting facts. Today's hearing was supposed to settle the boundary line, but nobody expected peace. Judge Hensley slammed, her gavel silencing the room. "Mr. Ford," she said, her voice like gravel, "I've read your filings, and I'm not impressed. Your attitude stinks of arrogance, and I won't tolerate it here." Ford leaned forward, his knuckles white, on the table. "With respect, Your Honor, I'm not the one lying through my teeth. Grayson's trying to steal my land, and you're letting him." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cutler smirked, but Hensley's face turned to stone. "Don't test me," she snapped. "You're not Indiana Jones, and this isn't a movie set. Speak out of turn again, and I'll hold you in contempt." Ford's jaw clenched, his eyes burning. "Contempt? I've got plenty of that for this circus." The gallery erupted in murmurs, and Hensley's gavel crashed again. "Enough! One more word, and you're in a cell." Ford slumped back, but his glare never wavered, a man ready to fight to the last. Cutler stood, his voice oily. "Your Honor, the defendant's behavior proves his disregard for the law. We have proof he tampered with the stream, and his fence is a deliberate provocation." He slid a stack of photos across the table showing dead fish and murky water. Ford shot up. "Those are faked, and you know it. Grayson's been dumping his own filth for years." Hensley pounded her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Ford, or I'll have you removed." The air crackled with hostility. Ford's lawyer, a nervous man named Ellis, tugged at his arm, whispering for calm, but Ford shook him off. "I'm not sitting quietly while they bury me in lies," he growled. Across the room, Grayson, a burly man with a red face, sneered. From the plaintiff's table. "You're done, Ford," he mouthed, his eyes gleaming with malice. The judge's patience was fraying, and Ford's temper was a lit fuse. Every word felt like a step toward chaos. Hensley leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. "Mr. Ford, you seem to think you're above this court. Let me be clear. I run this room, not you. One more outburst, and you'll regret it." Ford's hands balled into fists, but he stayed silent, his chest heaving. The gallery held its breath, sensing a breaking point. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was pride, vengeance, and two stubborn wills colliding in a room too small to contain them. As Cutler began his opening argument, droning about property lines and water samples, Ford's eyes locked on Hensley. She stared back, unyielding, a judge who'd seen every trick and hated showboats. The stage was set for a battle nobody could walk away from clean. The truth about the stream, the fence, and Grayson's motives hung just out of reach. But one thing was clear. This courtroom was a powder keg, and Harrison Ford was ready to light the match. The courtroom's ceiling fans whirred, doing little to cool the rising heat of tempers. Harrison Ford sat rigid, his eyes darting between Judge Hensley's stern face and Victor Grayson's smug grin across the aisle. The air felt thick, like the moment before a brawl. Cutler, Grayson's lawyer, paced before the bench, holding up a grainy photo of a fence post stamped with Ford's initials. "This," he declared, "proves the defendant knowingly built on our client's land. He's a trespasser, plain and simple." Ford's lawyer, Ellis, fumbled with his notes, sweat beading on his forehead. "Objection, Your Honor," he stammered. "The photo lacks context. That post could be anywhere." Hensley's lips thinned. "Overruled. I'll hear the evidence, but you'd better have something solid, Mr. Cutler." Ford muttered, under his breath, loud enough for the front row to hear, "Solid as a cow pie." Laughter flickered in the gallery, but Hensley's gavel cracked like thunder. "Mr. Ford, I warned you. One more, and you're out." Cutler seized the moment, his voice sharp. "Your Honor, the defendant's disruptions show his guilt. He poisoned our client's stream to drive down the land's value, then grabbed it for himself." He waved a lab report claiming it showed toxins traced to Ford's property. Ford surged to his feet, ignoring Ellis's frantic tug. "That's a damned lie. Grayson's been polluting for years, and now he's pinning it on me." The gallery gasped, and Grayson's face twisted with rage. "You're a washed-up liar, Ford," he bellowed. Hensley's face flushed crimson. "Silence! Both of you!" Her voice sliced through the chaos. "Mr. Ford, you're this close to a cell. And you, Mr. Grayson, control yourself, or I'll clear this room." She pointed at Cutler. "Continue, but stick to facts, not theatrics." Cutler nodded, but his eyes gleamed with triumph, sensing Ford's unraveling. He laid out more evidence: a witness, a ranch hand named Tucker, who claimed he saw Ford near the stream with a canister. "He was dumping something," Cutler said. "The next day the fish were dead." Ford's hands shook as he leaned toward Ellis. "Tucker's on Grayson's payroll," he hissed. "He'll say anything for a buck." Ellis nodded, scribbling, but his face showed doubt. The case was slipping, and Ford felt the walls closing in. He glared at Hensley, who was scribbling notes, her expression unreadable. "You're eating this up, aren't you?" Ford said, just loud enough for her to hear. Hensley's pen froze. She looked up, her eyes like daggers. "What did you say?" The room went still. Ford didn't back down. "I said, you're buying every word of this garbage. Where's the justice in that?" Hensley's jaw tightened. "You're in contempt, Mr. Ford. Bailiff, escort him out." The bailiff, a burly man with a buzz cut, stepped forward, but Ford held up a hand. "I'm not going anywhere until I get a fair shake. Grayson's a crook, and you're letting him walk all over me." The gallery buzzed, some cheering, others shouting for order. Hensley stood, her robe billowing. "You want fair? You're sabotaging your own case with this nonsense. One last chance. Sit down and shut up, or I'll lock you up." Ford hesitated, his chest heaving, then sank into his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. The bailiff stepped back, but the tension didn't ease. Cutler smirked, resuming his attack, but Ford's mind raced. He whispered to Ellis, "Get me that surveyor's report, the one from 15. It proves the land's mine." Ellis nodded, but his hands shook as he rifled through files. Grayson leaned toward Cutler, whispering, and both men glanced at Ford with cold satisfaction. The judge's warning hung heavy, but Ford's defiance hadn't faded. He felt cornered, betrayed by a system he'd never trusted. The evidence was stacking against him, but he knew the truth was buried somewhere in the dirt of that ranch. As Cutler droned on, Ford's resolve hardened. He wasn't just fighting for land. He was fighting for his name, his pride, and every inch of ground he'd earned. The courtroom was a battlefield, and he was far from beaten. The courtroom's wooden benches creaked as the gallery shifted, their whispers a low hum beneath the ceiling's groan. Harrison Ford sat stiffly, his hands gripping the edge of the table, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Judge Hensley's eyes bored into him, her earlier threat of jail still echoing. The bailiff loomed nearby, a silent reminder of her power. Across the room, Victor Grayson slouched with a predator's ease, his lips curled in a taunt only Ford could see. The air was heavy, charged with the promise of more trouble. Cutler, Grayson's lawyer, strutted before the bench, holding a sworn affidavit from the ranch hand, Tucker. "This man saw the defendant tampering with the stream," he said, his voice smooth as venom. "He's no hired liar, as Mr. Ford claims. He's a hard-working local, trusted by the community." Ford snorted, loud enough to draw Hensley's glare. "Trusted by Grayson's wallet," he muttered. Ellis, his lawyer, elbowed him, hissing, "Stop it, Harrison! You're digging a hole!" Ford ignored him, his eyes locked on Cutler's smug face. Hensley tapped her pen, her patience thinning. "Mr. Ford, I'm tired of your interruptions. You're not helping your case." Ford leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "My case? This is a setup, and you're too blind to see it." The gallery gasped, and Hensley's face tightened. "That's it. Bailiff, take him to holding. We'll resume in an hour." The bailiff grabbed Ford's arm, but he yanked free, standing tall. "You want me out? Fine. But I'm not the crook here. Grayson's playing you all." Shouts erupted from the crowd, some cheering Ford, others jeering. Hensley slammed her gavel, her voice booming. "Order! Mr. Ford, you're lucky I don't. Lock you up for the week. Get him out." The bailiff dragged Ford toward a side door, his boots scuffing the floor. Grayson laughed, a harsh bark that cut through the noise. "Keep digging, old man," he called. Ford spun, pointing. "You'll choke on that laugh when I'm done." The door slammed behind him, leaving the courtroom buzzing. In the holding cell, a cramped box with a single bench, Ford paced, his mind racing. Ellis slipped in, clutching a folder. "Harrison, you've got to stop antagonizing her. She's ready to bury you." Ford whirled on him. "She's burying me already. Where's that surveyor's report?" Ellis hesitated, then pulled out a faded document. "It's from 2015, like you said. It shows your fence is legal, but Grayson's team claims it's outdated. They've got a newer survey, and it's convincing." Ford grabbed the paper, scanning it. "Convincing? It's a forgery. Grayson's been buying people off for years." Back in the courtroom, Cutler called Tucker to the stand. The ranch hand, a wiry man with nervous eyes, swore to tell the truth. "I saw Ford by the stream," he said, avoiding the judge's gaze. "He had a canister, pouring something. Next day, the water was bad." Cutler nodded, satisfied, but Ellis stood, his voice shaky. "Mr. Tucker, isn't it true you owe Mr. Grayson money? A loan for your truck?" Tucker's face reddened. "That's got nothing to do with this," the gallery murmured, sensing a shift. Hensley leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Answer the question, Mr. Tucker." Tucker squirmed. "Yeah, I owe him, but I ain't lying." Ellis pressed, holding up a bank statement. "You were paid $5,000 by Grayson's company 2 days before your statement. Care to explain?" Cutler shot to his feet. "Objection! This is irrelevant." Hensley overruled him, her voice cold. "I want to hear this." Tucker stammered, his story unraveling, and the room felt like it was holding its breath. Ford was led back in just as Tucker stepped down, his head low. The actor's eyes scanned the room, catching Grayson's scowl. Something had shifted, and Ford sensed it. Ellis whispered, "We've got traction, but we need more. That surveyor's report could be our shot." Ford nodded, his jaw set. The truth was close, but Grayson's lies were deep, and Hensley's patience was gone. The fight was far from over, and Ford was ready to claw his way to victory, no matter who he had to take down. The courtroom's air was stale, thick with the scent of sweat and anticipation. Harrison Ford sat back at the defendant's table, his face carved from stone, his eyes flicking between Judge Hensley's unyielding stare and Victor Grayson's barely concealed sneer. The gallery leaned forward, their whispers a restless current. Tucker's shaky testimony had cracked the surface of Grayson's case, But the cattle baron's lawyer, Cutler, wasn't done. He stood, adjusting his tie, his voice dripping with renewed confidence. "Your Honor, we have another witness who will bury the defendant's claims." Ford's lawyer, Ellis, shot him a worried glance, but Ford's focus was on Hensley. She'd hauled him back from the holding cell with a warning that still burned his ears. One more slip, and he'd face real consequences. He kept his mouth shut, but his hands clenched under the table, nails digging into his palms. The fight was tilting, and he felt the weight of every eye in the room. Cutler called a woman named Clara Henshaw, a local environmental inspector. She was middle-aged, her face pinched, her voice clipped as she took the stand. "I tested the stream after the fish died," she said. "The toxins matched chemicals found on Mr. Ford's property. Paint thinner, specifically." Cutler handed her a report, which she confirmed with a nod. The gallery murmured, and Grayson's grin widened. Ford whispered to Ellis, "She's lying. I don't use paint thinner. Check her record." Ellis nodded, flipping through files, his hands unsteady. Ellis rose, his voice stronger now. "Miss Henshaw, isn't it true you were fined last year for falsifying a water report?" Henshaw's eyes widened, but she recovered fast. "That was a misunderstanding, cleared up months ago." Ellis held up a document. "Cleared up by a payment from Grayson's company, correct?" The room erupted in gasps, and Cutler shouted, "Objection! This is slander." Hensley's gavel slammed, her voice like a whip. "Overruled. Answer, Miss Henshaw." The inspector stammered, "It was a consulting fee, not a bribe." But the damage was done. Doubt hung heavy. Ford couldn't stay silent. He leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "Grayson's bought half this town, and you're letting him buy this court." Hensley's head snapped up. "Mr. Ford, I've had enough. One more, and you're fined." Ford's eyes blazed. "Fine me. Truth's worth more than your threats." The gallery buzzed, some cheering, others hissing. Grayson stood, pointing. "You're a liar, Ford. You'll lose everything." Hensley pounded her gavel. "Sit down, both of you, or I'll clear this room." Cutler, sensing the chaos, pivoted. "Your Honor, the defendant's outbursts prove he's unhinged. Let's focus on the surveyor's report." He produced a sleek document, claiming it showed Ford's fence was illegal. Ellis countered with the 2015 survey, his voice firm. "This proves the land is Mr. Ford's. Grayson's report is a fabrication." Cutler laughed, sharp and mean. "That old paper? It's worthless against our evidence." Hensley took both documents, her face unreadable as she studied them. The tension was a living thing, coiling tighter. Ford felt the case slipping, despite the cracks in Grayson's lies. He whispered to Ellis, "Get me the original surveyor. He's retired, but he'll know the truth." Ellis nodded, scribbling a note. But time was short. Grayson leaned toward Cutler, muttering, and both men glanced at Ford with cold certainty. They thought they had him pinned, but Ford's blood was up. He'd fought too hard for that ranch, poured his soul into its hills. No bully like Grayson would take it. Hensley set the surveys down, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'll review these overnight. But let me be clear. I want facts, not tantrums. Mr. Ford, you're on thin ice. Mr. Grayson, control your lawyer." She stared at both men, her authority absolute. Ford met her gaze, unbowed, his heart pounding with defiance. The truth was close, but Grayson's web of deceit was thick. As the session adjourned, Ford stood, his eyes locked on Grayson's. This wasn't over. He'd tear down every lie, no matter the cost, and walk out of this courtroom with his head high. The courtroom's morning light spilled through tall windows, casting stark shadows across the polished floor. Harrison Ford stood at the defendant's table, his posture unyielding, his eyes fixed on the empty judge's bench. The gallery was packed, their murmurs a restless tide. Victor Grayson sat across the aisle, his face a mask of forced calm, but his fingers drummed, betraying nerves. The air crackled with the weight of a final reckoning. Today, Judge Hensley would rule on the surveys, and Ford's fate hung in the balance. The side door opened, and Hensley swept in, her robe billowing, her expression carved from granite. She settled at the bench, her gaze sweeping the room. "We're here to settle this mess," she said, her voice like steel. "I've reviewed the surveys, and I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime." Ford's heart pounded, but he kept, still his hands steady. Grayson shifted, his eyes darting to Cutler, who stood ready with a stack of papers. Ellis, Ford's lawyer, rose first, clutching a new document. "Your Honor, we've located the original surveyor, Mr. Daniel Holt. He's here to testify." A murmur rippled through the crowd as an older man, weathered and lean, took the stand. Holt's voice was gravel rough, but clear. "I surveyed that land in 2015. Ford's fence is legal, dead on the boundary. Grayson's new survey? It's a fake. I checked the markers myself last week." The gallery gasped, and Grayson's face flushed red. Cutler leaped up, his voice sharp. "This is outrageous. Holt's retired, unreliable." But Holt didn't flinch. "I know my work, son, and I know a crook when I see one." Hensley raised a hand, silencing Cutler. "Mr. Holt, you're certain?" Holt nodded. "Stake. My name on it." Ford felt a surge of hope, his eyes locking on Grayson, who was whispering furiously to Cutler. The tide was turning. Hensley turned to Ford. "Mr. Ford, you've been a thorn in my side, but I'm starting to see the truth. Anything to add?" Ford stood, his voice steady but fierce. "Only this. Grayson's been cheating folks for years. He poisoned that stream to frame me, and he bought every witness he could. I'm not perfect, but I'm no liar." The gallery cheered, and Grayson shot to his feet. "You're finished, Ford! I'll ruin you!" Hensley's gavel crashed. "Mr. Grayson, sit down, or you're out." Cutler tried to recover, waving his survey. "Your Honor, our evidence is solid. Ford's team is desperate, throwing out wild claims." But Hensley wasn't listening. She held up Holt's testimony and the 2015 survey. "This matches the county records. Your survey, Mr. Cutler, has inconsistencies. I'm inclined to believe Mr. Holt." Cutler's face paled, and Grayson's hands balled into fists. The room sensed blood in the water. Ellis seized the moment, presenting a final piece, a hidden camera photo from Ford's ranch, showing Grayson's men near the stream with canisters, dated the night before the fish died. "This proves Grayson's sabotage," Ellis said. The gallery erupted, and Hensley's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Grayson, care to explain?" Grayson sputtered. "That's doctored. He's framing me." But his voice cracked, and the room saw through him. Hensley leaned forward, her voice cold. "I've heard enough. The land is Mr. Ford's per the 2015 survey. The stream sabotage points to Mr. Grayson, and I'm referring this to the district attorney. Case dismissed." Her gavel fell, final as a gunshot. The gallery roared, some clapping, others shouting. Ford exhaled, his shoulders easing for the first time in weeks. Grayson stormed out, Cutler trailing, both men defeated. Ford turned to Ellis, gripping his hand. "You pulled through." Ellis smiled, weary but proud. "You didn't make it easy." As the crowd thinned, Hensley caught Ford's eye. "You're lucky, Mr. Ford. Don't push me again." Ford nodded, a grudging respect in his gaze. "Fair enough." He walked out, head high, the Montana sun waiting beyond the doors. The ranch was his name cleared, and Grayson's lies were dust. He'd fought, bled, and won, and nothing tasted sweeter than that hard-earned truth.